Hello and welcome. Hey, this is Edward Medor with Workiz. I'm really glad that you were able to join us today. Before we dive in, I wanted to take a moment to introduce somebody that I've had the pleasure of getting to know really well over the last couple of years. The man, the myth, and the legend, Patrick Lange with Business Modification Group. How you doing, Patrick?
Doing fantastic, Ed. How are you, sir?
I am doing amazingly. Patrick, you really seem to be the type of guy that I literally see everywhere I go in the home service space. Like we are running in all of the same circles. Like, is that not true that we are always bumping into each
Absolutely.
other?
I think every event you and I seek each other out and see each other at it. So yeah, I think we both are in hotel rooms too much and on planes too much.
Yeah, I mean, but it's always good to see you, and I really appreciate the fact that you decided to join us today here at Workiz. I mean, Patrick, I view you as truly being, an industry expert when it comes to buying, selling, scaling HVAC businesses. I mean, you're just some. I promise I'm not schmoozing you. You are just somebody that I truly have a ton of respect for. And every time that I talk to Patrick, I feel like I'm walking away with something new. And I hope that all of you that have decided to, take time out of your day to join us today will also feel the same way. So today, this session is all about the real cost of growth. What do you really need to know? As an HVAC business owner, what you need to know about scaling, selling, or staying the course. Because Patrick, might not be the right time to sell, right?
Yeah, great point. I think Ed, everybody preaches grow, 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 and scale, 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 scale. But it's not always the answer. Growth is expensive, right? Hiring, training, marketing, buying new vehicles, new uniforms, doing this. And if the ultimate goal is to sell, and for many people it is, if you're building this up to sell, understanding your numbers and understanding that cost is so important. So many people come to me and we do valuations all the time. And I preach anywhere I can, and I'll do it here today, is get a valuation done on your business, because most people don't really know what their business is worth. And so I preach, get a valuation done. And so people come to me and I'll look at their growth, and they went from 3 million to 5 million to $7 million in sales, and they were making more money than they're doing $3 million than they are at $7 million. Now they have more headaches, more people, more overhead, and they're not necessarily more profitable. And so growth is not always the answer. And that sounds weird from somebody who sells companies for a living, right? I mean, I should be saying everybody should buy one, but the reality is it's not always the answer. And so I appreciate you having me on to talk about it, because I think it's something that's not talked about enough.
Yeah. And, I just hope, like, I'm interested in learning, as much as I possibly can, as I always do. But, hopefully today you can really help us figure out, what makes a business sale ready or not. And, how can we strategically plan for an exit, even if that means that it's years away, and then, when is staying the course going to be the smartest move? So, at the end of the day, whether you're running lean or managing a big crew, I think there's something in here for everyone. So, Patrick, I'm going to step off my soapbox and let you take it away.
Yeah, I think people always think bigger is better, right? And bigger can be better when it's time to sell, but bigger and better and profitable fit into that. Everyone preaches, unfortunately, from every stage at every heating and air and plumbing event across the country. Everyone preaches, I got this X amount of multiple, and it's some crazy dollar figure, right? 10-time multiple, 15-time multiple. You hear all these crazy numbers. Unfortunately, many times I think they're lying. Is part of what I've got to say. But the other part of that is if you're not making any money, right? If you're not profitable, and somebody gives you a 10-time multiple, well, is it really a big check? At the end of the day, to me, when looking at selling, to me, it's more important the check you're able to cash, not the multiple you're able to brag about. And so it's similar to running a business and bragging about gross sales. Well, it's great to have fantastic gross sales, but what are you putting in the bank at the end of every day? And what are you getting compensated for the amount of work that you're doing? And so oftentimes people come to me and they want to grow, they want to grow, they want to grow, or they want to buy, right? The answer is they hear everybody else buying these companies and they want to buy. And I think growth through acquisition is an incredible thing. It could catapult you and your business, but you better have your ducks in a row in your existing business. I think too many times people look at buying to solve their problems when it magnifies their problems, right? If your CSRs are not doing a great job, making the phone ring more is not going to help them. If your technicians are not maximizing the calls, giving them more calls to run per day is not going to help them. And so making sure you've got your business dialed in before you bring on another one. And the other part of that is I'm a big believer in culture. And so I really think you need to have your culture dialed in before you bring in somebody else's culture, because especially many people buy bigger than they are, which I often think is a mistake. So they're doing $2 million in sales and they're buying this $5 million in sales company. And the reality is your company is now going to take over their culture, right? There's more people there, there's more processes, there's more things in place in that bigger business. And it may hurt your business. And so I think doing a reality check on where you are today and making sure that your business is dialed in before you start looking at acquisitions. The other part of that is growth and acquisitions are expensive. And so if the ultimate goal is to sell short term, if you say, hey, I want to sell in the next year or two, oftentimes doing an acquisition is going to cause a bump in the road, right? Everything doesn't go smooth all the time. So you may not get compensated for the money you spent on that new acquisition. Now, if you're 3 to 5 years out, hey, then maybe acquisition makes sense. You can get the business in, get them acclimated, generate additional revenue from them, get some of your money back, increase the value of your business. And that's a good approach. But if you're saying, hey, I'm going to sell in the next 12 to 18 months, you may not be able to get them incorporated in time. And the additional expense from vehicles or lettering vehicles or training staff or new office space or all these things, you may get more expenses up front than the revenue justifies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
And so I think once again, it comes weird, probably sounds weird coming from a guy who sells companies for a living to say, don't buy a company, but it's not right for everyone. And so understanding that, are you losing your culture as you're trying to scale, or are you training? And the other thing I see, I look at a lot of companies that have been growing and their marketing spend is astronomical, right? They're having to feed the beast. They've got to find somebody new to sell something to every day in order to feed all these people that they brought on now. And a buyer is going to look at it and say, hey, are those long-term good customers that we're buying? Or are we just buying somebody who responds to an ad? Because if we're just buying somebody who responds to an ad, we can go out and market you, right? With all the private equity and big players in the marketplace, they can outspend most regular business owners. So if they can outspend you and get your clients, they're not going to pay you for them. What they're typically looking for is long tenured people, employees, customers, relationships is what they would prefer. And so that massive growth often doesn't yield the payday that you're looking for. And one of the things you brought up is, kind of what should you focus on? And this is Patrick Lange Soapbox 101, because this is something consistently is really, there's 4 things I think that if you focus on, and if you do them well and do them consistently, you're going to get a higher dollar figure for your business. One of them is get yourself out of your truck, get yourself out of the van. Too many business owners, specifically in the trades, they're incredible technicians, but not great business people. And they love being in the field and they won't get out of their own way. And typically when I see a company that's stuck at $1 million in sales that can't get above that hump, it's typically because the owner's in the field and they won't get out of their own way and they're stagnating their own growth. The second thing is a business built on service, repair, and replacement. So taking care of your existing customer, communicating with your existing customer, more opportunities with the existing customer, not having your technicians run 12 calls a day, having them run 3 or 4 and actually spending time with your customers and doing a good job. The other thing is clean books and records. Obviously, with Workiz, you understand tracking data. And when I show up to someone's office and they have file cabinets with all these pieces of paper in it, and they don't have anything online or systematized that makes things more challenging. But many people treat their business like it's their personal checking account, right? Pays for their grocery bills, pays for their vacations, pays every credit card swipe is something personal on the business credit card. And so if when we meet with a buyer and we're showing them how much money you make, I've got to give them a spreadsheet of 50 credit card receipts. We're not going to be able to get max dollar. Other part of that is many buyers are using SBA financing for their purchase. Well, we don't want to go into a government-backed lender and tell the federal government, hey, here's what it says they're making on their tax return, but they're really making a lot more money and they've been lying to you, and loan me money so I can buy it, right? It's just not. And that's not telling the government that you're making more money that you've been saying you've been making for the last 15 years is not what you're looking for either. And so by doing that, you're minimizing your buyer pool by not having good books and records, not treating your business like a business and the business checking account like a business. And the fourth and final thing, and this is where I usually get people angry with me, is staying away from new construction. Often new construction is a race to the bottom. And many people are not able to be profitable doing it, but they keep trying it, keep doing it, and end up chasing their tail. And so if you're looking to build a business that has the highest sale volume and sale price, new construction is not going to be part of that answer.
Because the margins are just horrible, right, Patrick?
Its margins are horrible. Oftentimes the loyalty is not there. And if they're loyal, right? I have a lot of people, and I'll say this too, hey, buyers don't like new construction. Oh, I've been with this guy or girl for 20 years. Yeah, but the minute you walk out that door, so does the relationship. And so now they're getting new bids. Now it's not their friend doing their air conditioner. It's this new owner who they don't know who's doing the air conditioner. They may not be as loyal. And many people that are in the industry remember 2007, 2008. I can't tell you how many people I met that in 2006 had 50 employees and by 2009 had 5. Because they didn't get paid. They didn't get paid on projects, and it seems to become, get this one done and we'll start paying you for the next one kind of stuff, and you end up chasing your tail. And it's often not the customer you're looking for, because that GC is often cheap, and they want you to put the cheapest equipment you can in. Well, now you're putting the cheapest equipment that you can in with the cheapest ductwork and slapping your label inside. And so when the customer calls and says, hey, I'm not getting good airflow in this room, they don't want to hear, well, your contractor was cheap and you made me put in the cheap equipment. That's not what they want to hear, right? So you've got to salvage this relationship on the work you did. So it's not a recipe for maximizing the value. So 4 things: stay away from new construction, get out of the van, clean books and records, and a business built on service, repair, and replacement. Long-term customer relationships is where the top dollar's at. Now, having systems in place, training staff, long-term tenure, all those things play into it, but they're all ancillary, in my opinion, to those 4.
And I love that you said that too. Like, it resonated so much with me. One of my favorite organizations out there, I do a lot of work with Service Business Evolution. They provide HVAC coaching, right? Like coaching for HVAC, plumbing, electrical companies. And so one of their trainers over there, Derek, he always says to me, he's like, the difference between a successful business and, one that's just kind of getting by is, the guy that decides he's going to stop working a job and running a business because he's out there, in the field every day. And you can't do that. Right. So I'm glad that you're also repeating this. And also thank you, Patrick, for the plug to Workiz, because obviously for those of you that are joining us today that don't have any idea, like, what the heck is Workiz and why are they inviting me to this webinar? We are a field service management solution that can help you keep everything super organized and start understanding, like, where are your ad dollars going, and like things that I'm hoping you'll actually touch on this too, right? Because you were talking about like, maybe a guy that says, like, for example, let's say I came to you, Patrick, and I said, I've got 2,000 active customers. You're probably going to ask me a few questions about, like, well, Ed, what is it that you define as an active customer? Because I hear this all the time. So he's like, yeah, I'm going to sell my business. I have 2,000-3,000 customers, right? But you know what I'm finding? a lot of them haven't even done business with you in, Lord knows how long, right? And so one thing I remember hearing you speak, I don't know, it was probably about 9 months ago, a year ago, and you were talking about service agreements, right? And at Workiz, we really try to promote our customers into selling service agreements, because what can that do for your valuation if you're thinking about selling your company, Patrick?
Great question. And so everything, right? I'm a huge fan of maintenance agreements, both for the customer and for the company, right? I think a customer that has somebody monitoring their system for them and cleaning their system and making sure everything's working as it should and spending time there, I think it's better for the customer. I think for the company, I can, I don't have a metric, right? For every 100 maintenance agreements, it's going to sell for X amount of dollars kind of thing. I know years ago, I've heard that people bought and sold businesses like that. And I've sold 145 heating and air companies now, and I haven't had anybody say, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollar per maintenance agreement. But here's what I can tell you. When I look at company with large amounts of maintenance agreement, there's a few key leading indicators. One, when I look them up online, their Google reviews are always a lot. No matter how many maintenance agreements they have, the more maintenance agreements they have, they seem to have the more Google reviews, which is a great thing. Second thing is employee tenure, right? A lot of these companies hire people, and then shoulder season comes, and what do? Right? Where there's no work for them, the phone's not ringing, what they do. Maintenance agreement allows that. I hear people complain all the time that you can't find good technicians. The companies that I see that have large maintenance program develop their staff, and one of the first places they get them training is doing maintenances. So they get an opportunity to train younger people into the industry, and maintenance agreements gives them that. Indoor air quality sales. When I look at companies that do maintenance agreements and actually spend time with their customer, right? They're not splashing and dashing. They're not running in and saying we did it and we're out of here, but taking time to talk to the customer and, how's the airflow in this room? Does anybody have allergies? Asking, pertinent questions. They're getting a deeper share of wallet, which is great, but because they're doing a better job, right? I'm not of the belief that just everybody needs to buy something. I think we've got too many salespeople dressed as technician in the industry. I know I'll get some flack for saying that, but I think when you look at companies that do a very good job taking care of their customers, there's a higher value for that business. There's a higher profitability of that business, and there's better employee tenure. And so by taking better care of their customers or doing a better job for them, it increases that loyalty. And then obviously, maintenance agreement, if I'm paying you $200 a year to watch my system, I'm buying my own loyalty, right? If something breaks, I'm calling the person and I'm paying money to watch my system for me. So automatically the customer is paying for their own loyalty. And I can go on and on preaching about why I believe in that. But I can tell you a company that has a high maintenance program count always sells for way more money than a company that doesn't do it. Always. Because they're more profitable, better employee tenure, better trained people, all those things I just talked about. And it translates into a bigger payday at the end.
Yeah, I love it.
Another thing you brought up, and I don't mean to kind of bounce around, but
No, that's okay.
brought up was on staying the course. And so once again, I preach about getting a review done of your business or getting a valuation done. And part of that reason is I meet with so many people that are 70 years old, and they call me out and show up at their house or show up at their business or do a phone call. And we review the numbers. I tell them their business doesn't have any value, and it'll rip your heart out, right? You do that enough, and find out these people have been doing it wrong and didn't know who to ask or didn't know that. And so part of the valuations, and we do them for no charge, and we do them annually for a lot of people, is so that I can stop having those conversations, right? I don't, the less of those conversations I have, the better it is for my well-being. Just because once again, it'll rip your heart out to tell somebody they spent their whole life and there's no value there, and they thought that's what they were retiring on. Most people go somewhere and hear something and say, oh, I heard this guy or this girl down the street sold for this amount. And once again, it may not be true. right? It may be true, but chances are it's not. They don't know how much they got up front. They don't know how much was cash. They don't know how much was an earnout. And now you're seeing stories of some companies not doing so well, and people who rolled equity and now their rolled equity is zero. And so there's all sorts of things that take place in the market. And so my thing is by doing it early, it gives you a track to run on and something to build for, right? If you don't know what it is today, how in the world do you know what it's going to be in 5 years from now? And so the answer is always just bigger, 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 bigger. And that's not the answer, right? I see a lot of companies that are way more profitable at $5 million than at $10 million or $12 million or $15 million in sales, because they've got it dialed in. They're not having to spend a bunch of money on marketing. They've got well-trained staff. Their overhead is kept to a minimum. And so those companies are much more profitable. And so if you're going to run the business for the next 5, 10, 15 years, does it make more sense to run a company doing $5 million in sales that's netting you $1 million, or one that's doing $12 million in sales and netting you $700,000 or $800,000?
Yeah.
And so there's a quality of life that goes into that, right? I mean, running a bigger organization oftentimes is more work, more headache, more mouths that you're responsible for, more families that you're responsible to feed. And so understanding where you are, to me, gives you that starting point and helps you paint the picture of where you want to be. I believe running a business, you should always be building a business to sell. Because if you're building a business that somebody wants to buy, it's going to be a much easier business for you to run, right? Nobody calls me, and that's the hardest part of selling smaller companies. I have a lot of people that call me and, hey, I'm a one-man or one-woman shop, or it's me and a helper. What's it worth? Well, nobody calls me and says, hey, I want to buy a job where I can work out in heat 14 to 15 hours and then go home and do
Really?
paperwork.
They don't?
No.
That's not your number one call?
Right. And then go home and do paperwork for 6 hours a night. Right. I
Right.
mean, at the end of the day, that's not somebody's dream. And so if you wouldn't buy your business, why would somebody else? And so by building a business that has systems, that has people, that has processes, that understand, that makes money, all those types of things going into that, that's what people want to buy. And that's what you should want to run. Right. So my dream seller is a business that doesn't have to be sold, right? Because then you could demand your price. Here's where we are. I can keep running it at this price, or I can keep running it and making X amount of dollars, or I'll sell it, whichever one you want. I'm okay with. And so that business is much easier to run than the one that has no systems, has no people, has no processes, not making money. And so by building a business to sell, it's making your life much easier.
Yeah. Now, Patrick, how often have you been able to help someone where, you provide them this free assessment of their business and you're evaluating all the things, and then you're like, I'm sorry, John, but your business isn't really worth anything. How often are you actually able to make suggestions and recommendations to them where they're able to turn things around and actually be able to sell their business in the future?
Not as often as I'd like, right? Many people, when they come to me, they're done. And so they'll come to me at a certain age and they're just burnt out, they're done. They don't come to me at 35 like they should. They come to me at 75 or 65. So oftentimes my advice falls on deaf ears, partially because they're out of gas, right? They don't want to go back into a business they've been running for 40 years and try to do the work to turn it around. And so that's not super attractive. So, but I do have a lot of, I'll call them success stories, where someone called me 5 years ago. We did evaluation, and here are two different examples. One, we did an evaluation and I said, hey, you need more maintenance agreements. You need to slow down your new construction. You need to focus on these things. And I'm not a coach. That's not my job. SBE does a great job. EGIA, Nexstar, there's tons of great coaching organizations out there, and that's not me, right? I'm happy to refer to one of those people, but that's not my job. But I can say, when we do evaluation, we're going to say, hey, you need, talking about those 4 things, you need to increase your maintenance agreements, or your online reviews are low, or you're doing a lot of new construction, or you're in the van a lot. So we're going to talk about those things and say, this is what I would focus on. And I've had cases where every year they send me a P&L and they fill out the questionnaire and we say, here's where it's improved. Here's where the numbers are. We've minimized the new construction. We've done this. And 5 years later, we've sold them for much more money than when we met 5 years prior. I've also had some where it's immediate turnaround, where we do it and a year later, it was like they waved a magic wand and said, we stopped doing this and started doing this and kept doing this and increased this. And we did it. And I have other cases. I have one, I can remember in Clearwater, Florida. I had a guy who was buying companies from me, buying small companies, 1-man, 2-man shops. He was a big company. And he was very profitable about buying these smaller companies and getting in the customer's home and turning them over to good, loyal customers of his. And it was kind of part of his growth strategy. And he said, you know, if they ever, the numbers they're paying ever get stupid, let me know. And and so I was selling another company in that same area, and the buyer said, hey, the one I was selling was like 5 or 6 million, and he was 12 or 13 million. And the one I was selling was 5 million, and the buyer said, hey, we'd love to buy this business, but we really need something bigger. Do you have anything bigger? I said, well, I do, but it probably costs you a lot of money. And they said, we're willing to pay a lot of money, so that makes sense. So I called the guy up and said, hey, you said whenever they get stupid, let you know, and I think they're stupid at this point. And he said, well, here's what, tell them to come back and see what they offer. Here's what my business is. And they came back, and I don't remember the numbers offhand, but it was like, they were like at 11 times or 12 time multiple. Went back to them and said, hey, they're 11 times or 12 times. He said, well, if they go to 13, they can own it. Like, what? And so we went back and they said, yeah, we'll do it. And this was 5 years older than he was planning on retiring. He was planning on running for another 5 years. He said, listen, if they pay me this amount of money, I'll walk away today. And he did. And it was because we stayed in communication and looking at the numbers. We did a valuation early on. As he's buying these other companies, we'd stay in communication, talk about the numbers. And so if it wasn't for that, he'd still be running it today potentially, and who knows where the market would be at that point. And we've seen a slowdown at the upper end of the market a little bit, and he may not have been able to get the check he was able to get at the time he was able to get it. So it worked out real well for him and for the buyer, right? The buyer needed something. They were willing to pay a premium for it. He was there willing to sell it for a premium.
Yeah. Patrick, I just thought of something. I'd like your input. I'm sure there may be some folks, viewing today that are also wondering this very question. So lately, there's been quite a bit of buzz in the industry about companies that are getting scooped up by private equity. What are your thoughts on private equity? Is it the right solution for everyone? Should I be desiring that my company is attractive to a PE investor? And what are some of the things that you think actually make a company attractive to a private equity company?
Great questions. So first one is private equity right for everyone. The answer is no. Absolutely not. You have to know what the outcome you're looking for from your business. But here's the reality. If you sell your business, if a mom and pop sells their business to a mom and pop, right? And that mom and pop decides a year later to sell to private equity, you can't stop that, right? So it could end up in the hands of private equity, even if you're not the one who directly sells it to them. But I think private equity is just a word that's thrown around, and everybody gets lumped into this private equity category, and everybody has a very positive take on it or a very, very negative take on it. And so not every private equity company is the same. They're not going to do the same things. They're not going to act the same way. Their time horizons are often not the same. So to say private equity is all bad or private equity is all good is not fair, really, on either side. But I hear a lot of people in the industry, private equity is ruining the industry, that kind of thing. I can tell you, since private equity got involved, the multiples for selling companies, even a company smaller doing $1 million a year in sales, it is worth more today than it was 5 years ago. And it's purely because of the interest from these outside the industry buyers that came to the market. So there's a lot of people who were able to sell their business for more money, purely, even if they didn't sell to private equity or a private equity group, because private equity was there. Now flip that. People get this private equity is the devil, and they're doing all these bad things. There's a company who I sell a lot of companies to, and they bought over 200 companies in the last 5 years. Well, if they have thousands of employees and over 200 branches, there's opportunities now for your employees to advance, right? They can move to another location. They can become a regional or a district, and that wouldn't happen in a mom and pop business, right? The highest your employees, if you're a traditional mom and pop heating and air company, the highest somebody can go is underneath you, right? That's the ceiling that they can go to. These other people in the space give them an opportunity to advance past that. Once again, that's not right for everybody. They're not all great. So I'm not here saying that. I sell a lot of companies to private equity backed groups. I sell a lot of companies to mom and pops. I sell a lot of companies to people, just insurance agents whose parents were in the trades and they want to get back to the trade. So the beauty of the market where it is today is if you've built a good company, you get to dictate who buys it. And that market, because of the private equity influence and gobbling up all these companies, has caused some scarcity. And so there's less companies to buy. So automatically the values of these companies have come up. So I think the overall push in the industry has been a positive one. And in many markets, private equities come and raise prices. So it's been easier for other people to raise prices behind them, because everybody else has raised prices. So I think there's been some positive in that, but that doesn't mean that it's right for everyone, right? If you've built a good business, when we go to market, my goal is to get as many eyes on your business as we can, right? I think more buyer creates more competition. The hardest part of my job is letting everybody know your business is for sale and nobody know that it's actually your business, right? We don't want your competitors, your customers, your employees to know it's for sale. So everything we do is confidential. But the more people looking at it and the more people that know other people are looking at it, typically makes them come forward with their best offer. And as a result of the trades becoming attractive to buyers, it's helped raise prices. But when we do that, the first thing we do when a buyer requests information, signs a non-disclosure agreement, proves that they're financially capable, and reviews the information, the next step typically is we set up right away a phone call to buyer and seller. Let's see if it's a good fit, right? Let's not wait until a month down the road and we're negotiating over points. I like to get them together right away with a phone call and say, is it a good fit? Let's do it for both sides. Does a buyer think it's a good, that the business is a good fit for them? And does the seller think what the buyer had to say is a good fit as well? And then after that, we typically have an in-person meeting for the same reason, right? For most people, most of my clients specifically, they've never sold a business in their life, and their business is the largest asset that they've ever sold. So on top of financially it being a huge deal for them, a huge impact for them, emotionally it is too. You're walking away from what you've done for most people their entire life. And emotionally it's a big decision to make. And we want to make sure that buyer is a good fit for them. And I've had some that said, I'll never sell to private equity. And we meet with a private equity backed group. And they leave the meeting and said, wow, those were the best people. Those were perfect. I've had others that said, I want this big consolidator to buy me. And we have a meeting with the consolidator and they're like, no, that's not what I want for my people. I'd rather Jim from Jim's Heating and Air down the street buy me out. And so that's the choice that you get to make if you've built a good business. I know that didn't answer your question directly, Ed, but did it provide some clarity?
Yeah, no, I definitely a lot of clarity there. I wanted to remind everyone, if this may be your first time on using this platform, in the lower right-hand corner of your computer screen, there is an option for chat, as well as questions. So feel free to ask any questions that you may have. Don't be bashful. Someone else might have the same question, but no, Patrick, this has all been really good stuff. Something I was thinking about, I forget exactly what you said there, but I mean, it's all around the state of the economy and where we're at these days. One of the biggest pain points that I continue to hear from business owners is regarding the shortage of talent within the trades, right? Like, how can that impact the valuation of my company? Like, is it a good time to buy because there is such a shortage in the trades? Like, what should I be considering? If I'm looking at exit strategies, or maybe I'm a guy who's like, yeah, I I want to get into this business because there's such a shortage in the trades that it's going to be like crazy profitable for me because, there's just not enough people out there to do this type of work. Tell us about that.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of people are buying to get the people, right? And it's a good opportunity. Once again, buying the right business, buying the right people, right? You don't want to buy, and I hate to use the term, but you don't want to buy a cancer and bring them into your organization, right? If they're not things in there. One of the things we do when we put together summaries is we put staffing tenure. Buyers love to see long-term employees. There's enough people that are chasing shiny ladder or the next company for 50 cents more an hour, and they're getting poached away. Many people, you look at their resume and they've been at 10 companies in 10 years, and it's not because they've been developing, it's because they've been chasing something on their own. And so to be able to see people that have been there and bought into the system and are loyal to the company and loyal to you has a huge impact on price. And that's why I see also so many people that aren't just poaching other people's employees, but they're giving people a track to run on, right? They're hiring for attitude, training for aptitude, bringing in good people and plugging them into their system. And that acquisition model allows that to happen more, right? If you've got more people, there's more opportunities, there's more chances for management or training or those types of things. And so buying can do that. The challenge when you're buying is are the employees going to stay? And that kind of comes on to you as the buyer to make it attractive for those people to stay, right? If you buy a business and the people leave, somebody's got to run the calls. And there's, as you've mentioned, there's a nationwide shortage on technicians and plumbers and electricians. And the reality is, Ed, most of the time when people call me and they'll start talking about valuation, I'll say, why are we talking? Why are you considering selling? I can't find anybody to work, right? I mean, that's a part of it. And sometimes they wait too late. So people leave and they had I have a lot of people that'll call me and say, oh, I'm doing $1.5 million in sales, service repair replacement, blah, 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 blah. I look at their numbers and their numbers are down. I'm like, whoa, you have 5 people there? Well, I did have 5 people and they all left, over the last year. So-and-so retired, so-and-so got hurt, so-and-so took another job, and now they have nothing. And they have no system in place to build that back up. And that's that ABR, always be recruiting.
Yeah.
And so I think acquisitions can be a way to help with that, but it's not the only solution.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, I got a couple other questions here for you because in all your years of experience, I'm wondering, your opinion, what are the most underrated habits of successful HVAC business owners that you've worked with?
It's broad, but it's taking care of your people, both customers and employees. Oftentimes I'll meet somebody with this old school mentality and, they're the slave driver on their people and then wonder why they don't stay, right? You're in a 100-degree attic every day and you're screaming at them and telling them they need to do it faster kind of thing is challenging. And then taking care of your customers. It's not just a sales opportunity. It's an opportunity to take care of them and develop deep relationships with them. And so that's not a specific show up to work at 5 o'clock every morning. Here's what you need to do kind of thing. But it's taking care of the people. And that's where I think many private equity companies start to struggle over time. This has happened before, right? There's been a big push acquiring heating and air companies, and then they went to something they found more attractive, and now they're coming back. And so I think it'll happen again. And I really believe this is a people business, right? You're dealing with your customers, you're dealing with your employees, you're dealing with your vendors, and you need to have good relationships or mutually beneficial relationships with all of them. Because without the people, there's nobody to run the call. You can make the phone ring all day long. If you don't have butts and trucks to go take care of the customers, you don't have a business. And so you don't have a good relationship with a vendor. And we've seen this over the last few years with COVID and now with the new refrigerant, some shortages in equipment. if you've got somebody that you've been loyal to and they've been loyal to you, and you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I need this, they can get it for you. That goes a long way. And if you've got a customer that's been a loyal customer that you've taken care of for years and years and years, when it's time for a replacement or when it's time for a major repair, you're their only choice. Yeah, that's all they know, and that's all they want to know is you. And so taking care of the people side of the business is so important. And I think sometimes it gets overlooked by looking at the dollars. It's not a spreadsheet business, right? You need to know the numbers, you need to track everything. But the business is not just about spreadsheet.
It's about your people.
Right.
Now, so I mean, sounds to me like if you were going to give like one single solitary piece of advice, to every HVAC business owner out there, it would probably be along the lines of take care of your people. But I mean, what are some of the common habits that you see, like truly successful HVAC business owners? They're not just taking care of their people. That's one thing, but like, what else do you see? There's got to be like a common denominator, right?
So running the business like a business.
Yeah.
Knowing your numbers. So many people don't know their numbers, right? And so when they go to price something, it seems like they're making money, but they're not, right? In many cases, they don't understand really how to price, and they don't understand the real numbers, and they don't understand the cost of running a business. And you see it a lot of times with technicians. I own a heating and air company, and so I've been in the shoes that most technicians sell out of their own bank account, right? So when they look at a customer and they talk about, do they need this X, Y, and Z, they think of it from their own bank account, and they probably couldn't afford it, and they can fix it themselves. So the answer is always just fix it. Well, just fixing it's not always the answer. And so understanding the numbers, understanding why you need to charge what you should be charging, understanding how to be profitable, because many owners, just like technicians, they feel bad for people and want to do it cheap, cheap, cheap. And if you're not in business 3 years from now to be able to take care of that customer because you were so cheap you couldn't afford to stay in business, you're not helping your family, you're not helping your employee's family, and you're not helping your customer because you're not there to take care of them. So profit's not necessarily a bad word, in my opinion.
Right.
You need to make a profit, and understanding what that is, and that all goes back to understanding the numbers, and understanding business. So many people are incredible technicians because they spent their whole life in the trades, turning wrenches and understand about it, but they've never taken the time to understand the business side of it, taken a class, read a book, participating in a coaching organization, those types of things to develop that side. And so where I see a lot of people that come into the industry with zero mechanical ability whatsoever, don't know anything, they don't know a capacitor from a contactor, and they build incredible organizations that are super profitable, doing an incredible job taking care of their customers, and have loyal employees because they understand the business side. And I think you need to understand both sides. The E-Myth talks about it a ton, the technician turned business owner, and these business owners get stuck in this technician role and never become a true business owner. And so I think the ones that I see that are super successful, maximizing value, are the people who treat it like a business, not just a job where they're fixing air.
I hear that. We actually do have a really good question here. Andrew asks, Patrick, for a healthy business, how much revenue percentage-wise should be coming from repeat customers, and how much revenue percentage-wise should be coming from service agreement customers?
Wow. So the first one out of the gate has to be a hard one.
That's what we're here for today.
So really, I can't answer that honestly, because the answer is going to be it depends, right? If you're growing a business, you need new customers to fill that growth, right? As you're looking at adding people and adding it. Here's what I can say from a number standpoint. From a buyer's perspective, if we see marketing spend above 8 to 10%, buyers get nervous. And so where I sell a lot of companies that has zero marketing budget. It's repeat and referral. and they don't separate out the repeat and referral. So it's hard to say, what percentage was existing customers. But once again, zero marketing spend whatsoever, and the phone rings more than they can get to it. I see that a lot. First time I met with somebody, they said, "Oh, phone rings more than you get to it." I'm like, "Yeah, sure it does." It does, and I hear that a lot. And often, many companies are telling people, "Hey, we can't get to you. You're gonna have to call somebody else," which to me as a business owner blows my mind. My head's ready to explode when I hear somebody say that, because I'm thinking, look at the opportunity you're missing. But for some people, it's more of a lifestyle business. And so it's not about getting to $10 million in sales. They make a couple hundred grand a year. It's more than anybody in their family has ever made. Who am I to say that's not right? Right? They have a good
Right.
life, fish, or do whatever they want to do. And so I'm not here to say you need to be doing $10 million in sales. If you're doing 2 million and it's a lifestyle that you want, it's a business that you want, good for you. But so to answer that question, once again, that barometer is 8 to 10% in marketing spend, which is going to dictate the health of the business, in my opinion. If you're spending 15 and 20% on marketing, chances are you're not real profitable. And it's growing for the sake of growing instead of profitability. Does that answer that? Do you think, Ed, you didn't ask it, but hopefully that provided him some direction on what he's getting for it. I can't say, it needs to be X amount just from existing customers. One thing I've heard a lot from a maintenance agreement count standpoint, though, is you should have between 500 and 1,000 maintenance agreements for every $1 million in sales. I don't see many companies with 1,000 and 1 million, but I can say 500 maintenance agreements per $1 million of sales. Typically, what I see leads to a very healthy and a very profitable company.
Yeah. And I mean, I take your word on that. Like, I don't know that I've really got any hard and true stats on any of that either, but I would lean more towards the side of like where you said, well, it depends, because everything I've ever learned in the industry is that not all businesses are created equally. Where you're at in your journey as a business owner, what your margins look like are completely different from John down the street, right? Like, and I think that's one of the biggest problems that people make is that they try to match their pricing based on what one of their competitors is doing. They try to plug in numbers that they think are just like industry averages, whereas, things are going to be weighed differently based on geography. If I'm running a business in Biola Battery, Alabama, it's certainly going to be quite a bit different than like maybe Austin, Texas, right? So a lot of variables that go into it. I don't know if there's really any hard and true rules for, what percentage is going to be X versus Y there. So
I think, it has a lot to do with change outs too, right?
yeah.
Some businesses are heavy in the change out market, and others are service repair thing. So that's going to dictate that as well. If you're heavy in change outs, you're going to have to find somebody new to sell something to, right? If they've got a 10-year warranty, they're going to be mad if they see you next year. And so it depends on that business mix as well, which once again makes it it depends kind of an answer. So sorry if that I didn't answer that well, but that's my thoughts on that.
No, that's all right. I actually had one other question there, just because it reminded me of one of our new partners at Workiz, JB Warranties, right?
Yep.
Do you think that there's like a secret sauce, if you will, like if you're offering a labor warranty, because you just said like, well, if I see you like anytime in the next couple of years here, I just bought this new system, like I'm going to be mad, right? Like, you think a successful business owner will always include some sort of a labor protection plan, maybe even just to protect themselves, right? Because the cost of having to roll a truck out there for something that, every new system is going to come with a manufacturer's warranty, but if something does go wrong and I'm warranting that, like I'm gonna have to go out there and fix it. So do you think you've ever seen where like folks that sell labor warranties are doing something smarter than the guy that doesn't?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of warranties and JB. I've partnered with them for a number of years, and they've been great partners. Have a lot of respect for them and what they've done. I don't know that everybody has to buy one, but I think everybody should be offered one.
Right.
in the industry is when you tell someone, when you install a unit and say it's got a 10-year parts warranty, they don't hear that. They hear it's got a 10-year warranty.
Yeah.
And a year later, when something, or 2 years later, when something goes wrong and you come out and you give them a big bill for labor and they hate you and they said, I had a warranty, because they didn't hear that. And so I think offering that and providing, educating the customer on that is better. And I can tell you, especially from a valuation standpoint, having labor warranties in place versus doing stuff in-house, drastically different from a pricing standpoint. So I have a video on my YouTube channel talking specifically about that. That there's definitely a difference in those companies, and I think the more protection that's there, the better it is. And so now, when you go out, instead of the customer being mad at you because something you broke already, and now they've got to pay more money, now you get to fix it. You're the hero, and you get to get paid for fixing it. So it ends up being a win all the way around.
Could you do us a favor and drop the link to your YouTube channel in the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll
Okay.
give me 1 second to pull that up.
And I'm also going to drop a link in the chat. Again, that's in the lower right-hand corner if you guys are looking for it. Where if you're interested in seeing a demo of Workiz, you've not yet checked out our software, we can really help you unlock some major efficiency within your business. Patrick, when will you entertain selling a business or helping someone sell their business if they've not yet embraced some sort of field service management software? Like, will you ever help somebody if they don't have software yet?
Yeah, I do. But man, it makes things so much more challenging, because we've got a more educated buyer pool, and buyers are saying, hey, tell me how many of these you have. Well, we don't know. Like you talked about, active customers. To me, we count active customers that have been serviced typically in the last 2 years. And so if they haven't been serviced in 5 years, they're probably either somebody else's customer, they don't live there anymore.
Right.
Or they bought a piece of equipment and they're not being serviced. So we'll help them, but it makes it harder for everyone. And as a result, as it's harder for everyone, it has an impact on sale price, right? If you're making the buyer do a bunch of work to prove your numbers and verify that it's true and get confidence around that what you're saying is accurate, and now they've got to come in and pay somebody to input all of this information into their CRM system, they're going to discount it for that work. And so having those pieces in place, absolutely, one, gives you a better ability to track your numbers. And I've been bragging about tracking numbers the whole time. And two, gives a buyer confidence that the information's there and the information is accurate. And three, it's a marketing opportunity, right? If you have all the customer data, names, phone numbers, email addresses, that type of stuff readily available, that they could do an email campaign or check on equipment age or do other things at the click of a button, it's worth more to them.
Yeah, and I love that you said that too, because it reminded me, I spent about a decade working for HomeAdvisor.com, which is now known as Angie. It was Angie, and then it was Home Advisor, and then it was Angie. But in any case, one thing that I used to love is I'd be talking to an HVAC business owner, and they would say, well, I shouldn't have to pay for that lead because that was already my customer. They came to me 3 years ago. They're in my CRM, and I want a refund for that lead because it was already my customer. And I'm like, was it? Was it really? You should stay in touch with that customer often because they're out there shopping around. They're looking for someone else to solve their problem. So I'm sorry today, sir, you do not get a refund.
Yeah, we could do another whole video on just that.
Yeah, we could.
Customer communication. That's another class for another day.
Well, listen, Patrick, I cannot thank you enough. Folks, I hope that you've been able to walk away today with at least one nugget. That's basically what I look for in this life is, if I can walk away with even just one new piece of information, I'm calling it a win. And so I appreciate, again, thank you so much for joining us. In the chat, Patrick has shared his link. You can go check out tons of videos with Patrick Lange. There's also a link in there if you'd be interested in seeing a demo of Workiz. Please click that link and we'll reach out to you. And then also a question from someone else, Pamela was asking, will we be sending a recording of the event? The answer is yes. So if there's members of your team that couldn't join us today, we will be sending out a recording of today's event. And thank you so much. And I hope that you guys have an amazing rest of your day and great rest of the week. Take care.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, Patrick.